Thanks for tuning in to Lightbox Live. We will begin our live stream panel discussion in just a moment.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Lightbox Live. So Lightbox Live is our programming series dedicated to creating space for both emerging and established new media artists and technologists. This is our first time doing this on the web, so hopefully it works out well, but we're really excited to kind of use this opportunity to, shed a light on the incredible artists and creatives who have been leading the way in art and tech innovation. So our topic today is actually very fitting. We're thinking about inside the box and adapting environments. And we'll be speaking with 3 artists and designers who work to transform their given surroundings with incredible visuals using their various skill sets. So our first panelist is Jake Fisher. Hey, Jake. Jake is an installation artist based in New York, and he primarily works with string and light. He has several temporary and permanent installations for clients such as Hilton Embassy Suites in Seattle, Walt Disney Television Upfront event in New York, and he was actually part of our Artists in Residence program at Lightbox a couple years ago, so we're excited to have you here today. Next, we have Motomichi Nakamura. Motomichi is an animator, projection artist, and lecturer based in New York. He works with various forms of media, including painting, sculpture, animation, and projection mapping. And his work has been featured globally, including the Sundance Film Festival and the MoMA. And he recently, he's actually part of our Times Square installation at Zaz Corner right now. Unfortunately, we can't go see it, but it looks incredible. And then finally, we have Jen Whitney here. Jen is a spatial designer, creative director, and partner at the Brooklyn-based agency With Good Friends. Her experiential career began working with David Stark Design and has grown to oversee projects, including 29 rooms for 4 consecutive installations. So welcome, everyone. So our first question is going to be for Jake here. So your installation work, primarily involves string and light, yet there's a great variety in what you've been creating over the past decade. Can you tell us how you're able to make each of your works stand apart from one another using such simple elements? And does the environment you're working in affect, this in any way?
Yeah, totally. So I start each one of my installations trying to really get a sense of the space that I'm working within and the environment that I'm working within. To me, installation art is really like a conversation or a dialogue between the space and the environment that I'm working in. And I like to try to listen and to the space. And what I mean by that is that allowing the space and the environment to dictate the work within it. So I think when you think about it in that sort of sense, it's almost impossible for 2 installations to really ever be the same. Whether it's the architecture in the space or the size of the space, it makes it that any installation, even if they may, have the same materials or be working within that kind of same aesthetic, because there's so much emphasis on the space and on the environment that the installation exists within, it makes it that no 2 installations can really ever be the same. When I think about the way that the simple elements come into this piece, I almost feel like, those are always able to be changed and altered, and they are changed and altered based off of that environment and that space. And I think that is why each one feels different, because obviously, you know, no two rooms are the same, no two environments are the same, no two spaces are the same. So yeah, I think that's you know, how they feel different between each one because of that emphasis on the space and the emphasis on the environment and how the work exists within that space and within that environment.
Cool. Thanks for sharing that. The next question is for Motomichi. So you went to school for illustration, but you eventually, you know, began working with projection mapping as well. Can you kind of tell us what propelled, you know, that evolution from one canvas to another?
Sure. So I studied illustration, but then when I was in school, I started animation. But actually, when I graduated, I started working as a web designer, but also doing animation work. I was doing a lot of animation work for like broadcast stuff, motion graphics, and a lot of stuff also for the web too. And then started doing the video installation work. That's how we used to call. And then from there, the VJing. So that went on for a while. But that was, I think, back in maybe 2007 or something. The projection mapping all of a sudden became sort of like a thing that we all did video installation, and we used to call it the projection surface, non-flat projection surface or something like that. And then almost like one to the other, just this new term came out, like projection mapping. And then now everyone wanted to project onto non-flat surface. That time, no one wanted to project onto the, but then, and that was kind of exciting in a way that it's just because the fact that you can take something you create in your screen and out of your screen and then merge into the environment. So the, like if you just, as long as you project onto the like flat rectangular square surface, and then it's sort of like extension of the screen. But then once you start involve all these existing objects, the elements, and then you sort of like merge into it. So that's how kind of naturally kind of progress to that.
Cool. Awesome. Jen, so you've overseen the installation of 29 rooms for 4 consecutive installations. Can you tell us what it was like working with such a large, you know, collaborative of different artists? And, you know, when a lot of them have, you know, very different styles, what went into ensuring the installation maintained a unifying vision?
Yeah. So each year, 29 rooms had a different theme, and then that theme definitely served as the overall guiding kind of umbrella for all the different approaches for each of the rooms. And then on top of that, a lot of the concepting for the rooms was done even before we began artist outreach. And that was to ensure that all the concepts and the ideas really laddered back to Refinery's editorial content and made sure that it was really staying true to Refinery's brand mission. So we created a really big board where we put visions for each of the concepts all together, and we could keep track of them that way, and also see visually how each of the rooms was coming together, making sure that we weren't repeating any concepts, or visually nothing felt too similar. Having that big board really helped bring all the concepts to life in unique ways.
Can you give us an example of like one of the concepts?
Sure. There was Alexa Mead for the year called Turn It Into Art. She did a stand where she painted every surface, every object and prop that was in it, and guests could step into it and immerse themselves in art by wearing the clothes, putting on the props, and it made them look like they themselves became part of a painting.
Cool. So Jake, how have your studies in architecture influenced your work? And in what ways does this background knowledge, you know, aid you in your artistic process?
Yeah, totally. So although I never really formally studied architecture in school, I studied studio art. I did take a lot of classes and did a bunch of research on architectural theory and architectural history, because in my mind, it felt like there really was this sort of direct connection between what I was thinking about conceptually when I was creating installation work, and what what an architect is trained to think about when they build a house, or when they build a building, or when they are planning and creating a city. So I found it really interesting, the questions that architects are called on to answer when they are designing or creating, for example, how a space is going to be used. If an entrance is here, how does that dictate how a person moves through the space? How does the height of the ceiling going to make someone perceive the space? How through the use of light, whether it be natural light or artificial light, may dictate how one feels in the space. And it was questions like these that I felt like I was asking myself when I was creating installations. So it felt very applicable. And I think that's really why I took a liking to understanding the importance of architecture and the way that architects and a lot of times think. And then I think obviously I became really intrigued with the concepts brought forth, like in the Bauhaus movement, which is, this idea of a total work of art, the concept that art, would eventually all be brought together, right? And I also think that I found it really interesting what these modernist architects were doing, Mies van der Rohe, Le Corbusier, right? And how they were defying these preconceived notions of what architecture should be, and how the old guard of architecture no longer represented the society and the culture that was present at the time. And although I think my work is, aesthetically very different from these modernists, I think I'm probably more of a maximalist if you see my work. I think it's these same sort of concepts and these same principles that I try to push forward in my work, like what art can be, where art can exist, what the purpose of art is, what the functionality of art is, and what it's meant to achieve, and why it's meant to achieve that. And are those things really like in line with what's going on in our culture, in our society? And is the old guard of the old art world, reflecting those, or is this something that we kind of want to change through these new, installations? And I think that the questions that architects were asking at the time during this modernist period were much more interesting to me than the questions that artists were asking, because the artists, I think, were defying, content and style of the old guard, where the architects seem to be reconsidering and questioning and defining how spaces and environments can be used. And I think, as I mentioned before, those spaces, those environments, relate much more to me, and dictate my process and dictate the environments that I create. So I think that's really why architecture and architectural theory and history, really have, a place within my practice as an artist, and why I think it's important.
Cool. So would you say that you would recommend, aspiring installation artists to have some background in architecture?
Yeah, I mean, I think like with installation art, it's a whole jumble, if that's a word, of a lot of things, right? And kind of pulling from every source that you can, whether it be architecture, art history, science, engineering, technology, right? To put it all together in something is, so crucial. And I think that's how you need to really kind of think as an installation artist, because you're dealing with an entire space, an entire environment, and not just one specific, painting.
Yeah, that makes sense. My next question is for Jen. So obviously, at Lightbox, we've worked with a lot of experiential agencies over the years. And one of the key elements in any experiential activation is storytelling, as you know. So how do you specifically tackle telling a brand story through design? And what do you think are some of the most important aspects to keep in mind when you're doing that?
Yeah, I think one thing that's really important right now is use of materials and how to minimize your footprint. I think a lot of brands are starting to become aware of how important waste is right now. As an example, we worked with Everlane about a year ago. They had pledged to be plastic free. So it was really important that that story continued through the event, that it was also a plastic-free event, and also that all the materials we used were also very considered for the environment. They could be recycled, donated, and up to even the food, making sure that the food doesn't go to waste, that that finds a place after the event. I think another way is through guest experience, how you design the space to be accessible to a guest. Are there long lines? Will people expect food? What time is the event? I think how you take care of a guest at an event also speaks a lot to the brand's narrative and the story that they're trying to tell.
Makes a lot of sense. Motomichi, obviously, as you said before, you work, with a lot of different mediums. So when you're working on a new project, how do you determine what medium you'd like to display it on? And do you decide on the medium first and then create the artwork, or do these decisions kind of, occur simultaneously?
Yeah, I guess I would say that it has a lot to do with the given condition, like a space. Like, I mean, I think as an artist, we all have sort of like something that we want to work on specifically at that point, but at the same time that the space or the physical condition doesn't necessarily allow it. So from there, I bring some kind of ideas, but then try to work it out. But I think at the end, I'll sort of like try to put myself into the shoes of the audience. Like, let's say if it's a space, what do they see when they come in? And then I think it's more than just what the content is. I try to focus on the sort of like impression they get. If I want them to feel if I want to show something more playfulness and the stuff like that. So I think it's creating the new work is one thing. Also, I do a lot of new adaptation on that. Like for example, the recently a couple years ago I did the exhibition in some space which has very tall space, and then I always wanted to put the huge paintings in place like that. But at the same time, that I found out that space you can actually shut off the light. It has a huge window, you can shut off the light. So I was just thinking what to do, and then I actually had a huge painting. So I decided to animate that. So I created 3 big paintings, animated. That was in Norway. So stuff like that. Just try to get the sort of like the best out of the space. So I think it just I myself don't know how it come out at the end, but I'll just try to kind of always focus on kind of like result in a way.
Yeah. And so for that project, you're mentioning like what type of emotions you talk about, like how guests are going to feel. What were you hoping that they would feel when they walked in?
So so the space is like has a very the work is called gaze, and I wanted people to have sort of like emotional connection with that work, but in not such in subtle way. I wanted something more like direct. So I had these paintings where that is focused on sort of like having eye contact with the people. So that's why I made a huge painting and I put it on the floor level. So this one I decided to put it much higher because it was bigger. But then I adjusted so that all the paintings, when it's animated, you look down. So that, and I calculated the distance and where they will stand and how the shadow comes. So that gets a little bit tedious, but then I will go through that process is because I know that how I want the final result to be. So I wanted people to feel a little bit kind of scared or like kind of overwhelmed, but also kind of personal connection.
Really cool. So this is a question for both Jen and Jake, which I think has been like very relevant in our panel discussions at Lightbox. But a lot of the work that you create is naturally very photo op friendly, and with the rise of Instagrammable art, which has drawn some criticism over the years, how do you think social media and this type of sharing has impacted your work or your perception of the work? And is this trend usually something that you kind of lean into, or do you try to like steer away from it? And then we can start with Jen.
Yeah. It's definitely changed my design process a lot. I think now instead of designing for a single guest, I'm also designing for that guest's audience. So when I'm creating an experience, I'm not necessarily thinking about the word Instagrammable. I'm more so thinking, how far does this concept reach? Will it live past 90 minutes that, this event is live, and how long should it live on, and what is meant to be taken away from the experience. It's not necessarily that the goal is that something should be Instagrammable. I think the goal is that it should be meaningful to share. I also think, and I'm hopeful, maybe this is too optimistic, that consumers are getting smarter, and what we now consider to be Instagrammable moments, I think, are more so moments that are specifically designed for selfies. But I think that they're going to start to want more individualized experiences. I don't think that they really want to be told where to stand and have the same photo that every other person has when they go into that experience. I think they want to go in and feel like they had something that was uniquely catered to them at that time. Hopefully.
I hope so too. Jake.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, what Jen just said was, right up my alley, and agree with basically everything she had just said. But, for me, I think I've totally leaned into it. I mean, it plays such a large role in society now that in a way it feels naive for me to think that I could steer away from it. I think what's most important to me as an artist is to create installations that invoke experiences and emotions in people who view the work. And photos and Instagrams almost feel like a byproduct of the installations that I create at this point. And I think that, people taking photos and people taking videos and putting it on Instagram with their phones in a way allows them to have their own unique experience within the installation through their own lens. No pun intended there. So, I think it's also important, to note that none of my installations, there's a specific place to stand and take a photo to get that optimal Instagrammable shot, which Jen was just talking about. It's not about that. It's about, creating a work that, evokes emotion in someone, and that emotion that is being, or that experience that that person's having just makes them want to take their phone out and say, hey, let me take an Instagram of this, rather than, oh, this is the place I'm supposed to take this photo in. And, installation art for the most part, and is temporary. And what I mean by that is that it rarely exists in a space forever. For me, installations, I have some up that are up for 6 months. I have some up that are up for one night. And although installations are ephemeral and only exist for, a specific amount of time, the rise of social media and the ability that people now have to take photos, to take videos, to document the installations through their phones, in a way takes this ephemeral moment or the ephemeral memory that someone may have when they are in an installation and turn it into a digital artifact that they can really keep with them. And that's something that people haven't been able to do before with installation art. And I find that really powerful.
Cool. So Jen, obviously you work in spatial design, and you incorporate a lot of eye-catching elements like we were just talking about. But it seems that you also create, many opportunities for audiences to use their own imagination. How do you create those more spontaneous moments while still having kind of a very concrete, design in place?
Yeah. I think ways that we've done it in the past when I first started in this industry was by layering in theater or performance art into an experience and bringing that in. I think some of the new ways that we're seeing it that feel more exciting to me involve incorporating tech into different installations. As an example, I've seen installations that have used heart rate monitors to activate lighting patterns or facial recognition tools to create experiences that are based on perceived moods in an audience. I think there's a lot that is exciting when it comes to new tech and how it can be used in an event experience, especially to make things feel more individualized and personal. Although I know that not everybody is totally ready to accept it on tech, sometimes on a personal level from that perspective, but I do wish that the event industry bridged the gap more between design and tech and brought it more into experience.
That's what we're doing at Lightbox.
Yeah, totally.
So the next question is for Jake and Motomichi. You both have, signature styles that come through in every piece that you create. How are you able to balance your specific style with the client's needs and with, the given canvas? And are there kind of any issues that you ran into in the past during early projects and that you kind of figured out how to move past that when you worked on future projects? And we can start with Motomichi.
Okay. Well, I guess in my case, that when I work on when people approach me, the way it is now, and then they've seen pretty much most of my work, so they know what to expect. So that is already, I think it's quite easier if I've done like taking like a lot of wider range of commercial work. So that, but what I realize is that when someone likes your work and then they come to you, and then they don't necessarily see what you see. So that's I think it's there are a few occasions where I didn't quite understand, or maybe I just didn't ask the right question, put it that way. So they say they like my work, and because of the way I see my work, it was completely different. There's something sometimes very specific thing they want, and they didn't see that side of the work. So I think those are the part that where the earlier that I didn't really see that part. So now that when I work on the project like that, I basically ask what they want, not like so that I just do whatever. It's more that I will just take it always as a collaboration, because if I can see what they see, and then we can come to the good collaboration sort of like combination to it. So I think that part that I try to kind of figure this out as quick as possible in a way. Yeah.
And actually, I have a follow-up question to that, and then we can jump to Jake. But have you ever been in a situation where so you ask them what they want, they tell you, and you're thinking like, I'm not the right person for this, or I wouldn't do this? Oh, this is for Motomichi.
Oh, okay. So their project that I didn't take it.
Yeah, like have you ever kind of run into a situation where, a client or like a commercial work, they tell you what they want because you ask them, but you don't think you're the right person, like you wouldn't be able to offer what they want, or it's just you wouldn't want to kind of sacrifice your art for that, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's some one of the example that is that I've been approached to do like projection mapping. And then I think the main focus of the mapping was more about like a lot of special effects, like explosions, and then that I basically told them that I could do it, but I don't think I'm the right person. Because that I really had to say. I barely say that kind of stuff, but I really didn't. I mean, I asked several questions, but then after that, I just don't think that they will be happy that way, and I don't think that I'll be happy that way. So it says, no, I'm not the kind of person who can create something like that. And then so that those are the things that I had to kind of let it go.
That makes sense. Yeah, we've had a lot of these conversations with different artists in Lightbox before, like commercial versus art, and kind of where do you draw the line. So Jake, tell us about kind of your style and how are you able to kind of balance, that style with client needs.
No, I'm just I'm laughing over here because I have like such a similar mindset to what Motomichi just said. I mean, and total, same mentality, I think, when it comes to that type of stuff. I think that, and I'll get to that in a second, but I think when I first started, for example, and I think for young artists, it's really, really important to establish, what your aesthetic is, and that you have this lengthy portfolio, right? And that clients feel, and when you don't have that, I think a lot of clients feel much more comfortable pushing their concepts, their ideas onto you, and having you implement them in the way that they want it to be implemented. And I think as an artist, you begin to develop your own aesthetic that people know is your, kind of what you work within and your style. And my experience has been that clients now tend to want to work with me because they know what I do, and this is what they're going to get. So, it used to be, I think, more like, oh, you could, let me throw this idea out there, this idea, hundreds of ideas. And, but now I think, it's the time and the portfolio and the body of work that you build up that allows you to kind of be in a position where you can say, this is the kind of work that I want to do. This really isn't so fitting for me. And I think it takes time to do that. So I think there's no magical answer, in that sort of sense. It's just really patience and building up that work. And I think you need to be really comfortable in what you create. I think that, you need to be really sure in what you create and say, this is what I create. And I understand maybe what these people want and what this client wants. And if it makes sense, then that's awesome, and if they're willing to work with you and work together and say, listen, this is what you do, this is what we do, let's bring those two things together, which happens a lot of times, and let's get this incredible message across, or whatever it may be, that's great. But I think you really need to have a body of work that people are able to kind of look at and say, this is what you do, and allow people to, I think, see that, understand that. And another really important thing, it's funny that you said this, Daphne, because it was like the last thing that I had thought of, was that a really important skill that I'm learning right now and I'm continuing to learn, is that the ability to say no to a project, right? And that, I think, is really important. I think it's really difficult to do. I mean, when I first was starting out, I think like it was every project, no matter what, we'll do it, we'll figure out a way to make it work, no matter what, right? And you get to a point, I think, where you start to say, well, listen, this doesn't really make sense with what I'm doing. And this doesn't, this may be really great for this brand, or this really might be great for this client, but how's it affecting me? And asking yourself that question and having the ability in a way to say, listen, and this doesn't work for what I'm trying to do, what I'm trying to achieve. And I don't think there should be any like hard feelings or anything, it's just, it's not what you do. And there's probably a better person who could do this, like Motomichi was saying, and learning the ability to say no to a project. I mean, it's a hard thing to do. Maybe it seems easy, but it is, because, like you're like, oh yeah, maybe you'll get the project, you'll get some money, blah, blah, whatever. But, I think it's really important. And I think when you think about a career in a long-term way, it's those questions that really are important, and people, want to see that, that you're able to stay true to kind of what your style is, what your aesthetic is, and what you're trying to do.
Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Motomichi,
Yep.
Is there a canvas or medium that you would like to explore a bit more? Or do you find it easier to focus on one project at a time?
No, I would definitely like to always explore the different media, and then especially I really like the finding a way to kind of do collaboration work, so that way like work with the artists from different media and stuff like that. What media? Yeah, I like to kind of find a way, like these days I'm trying to find a way to combine my projection with people. So like you can say live action, but also like in a way that the not that just projection, or this, they tend to be sort of like projected and the people look at it. I want to kind of find a way to sneak it in some way, so that the projection or my image just goes part of their everyday life or something like that. So that also that's also the reason I'm being kind of trying to do more outdoor projection. And then I'm being reworking on this sort of like what's the best way to do like mobile projection And basically the fact that you always have to depend on the power cord is just limits, but if you take that out, and then it gives more possibility to it. So that way, just kind of trying to move away from this like projection limitation, like in a way. So I guess that could be non-projection too, I guess.
Yeah. So my next question is for Jen and Motomichi. From pop-up shops to subway creatures, both of you have experience in transforming the everyday, environment to create unique experiences. Can you tell us where you draw inspiration from for these kinds of projects? And we can start with Jen.
Yeah, sure. I draw a lot of inspiration from movie sets and also from books and sculpture artists. When I'm first starting out a project, I think a really great exercise is to write out it as if you're writing out the scene of a movie or a play, to try to kind of paint the picture verbally before you even start to draw it. I think sometimes you get more imaginative results that way before you even dive into reference imagery or anything like that. But I'm a big fan of the imagination and where it can go.
What about you, Motomichi? Where do you draw inspiration from?
I get a lot of ideas from it's called cryptozoology. It's a study about the mythical monsters, and then a lot of people be like, let's say Bigfoot, Loch Ness monster. I can go on. What I like about, because they all exist. But what I really like about is the sort of like personal like encounter people describe. Like let's say when they saw Bigfoot or like the Loch Ness monster or Mossman or whatever, and then they talk about that moment. It's such a personal moment, and then I want to kind of recreate that. And then I think it's just a lot of times when people tell stories, and then and the more you tell, and then it becomes more of this very subjective kind of stories, and then that's how sort of like a monsters starting to kind of form as more monster, I guess. But so then my idea is that I always try to kind of find a way that how I can recreate that in a way everyone can see. So like let's say if you project something in a subway and then it's there, so you don't have to be dreaming that it's there and everyone sees it. So I think it gives me kind of pleasure, like when I did a projection in subway, and then a lot of people don't realize, because I guess New Yorkers are really busy, like very busy, and then you have something right in front, they just ignore. But then like one of the kids like realizing it, and then oh, look at that, and then mom or nanny realize, and I just like, oh, I can't believe they didn't see it. So it's that kind of thing, and they see and it's there. So I like that sort of like the bit of a surprise in a way, and also trying to visualize something that you imagine in your head, but then make it come to life, I guess.
That's really cool. We've asked a lot of artists where they draw inspiration from, and not a lot of them have said monsters. So I appreciate the originality. So I have one more question, and before I ask it, I just want to invite our audience to think about any questions that they might have for the artists. We usually do a Q&A in person, so we'll be doing it through the chat. There may be like a little bit of a delay, so please be patient, but I have it open, so hopefully you can think of some questions. So my last question, actually it'll be for everyone, but we can start with Jake. Can you tell us of any artists or some experiences that have influenced your work?
Yeah, of course. So I'll start with the artist. And so I can't say anything without saying, my mentor and advisee's name, who is Judy Pfaff, and she was really a pioneer of installation art. She kind of took me under her wing when I was at school at Bard, and decided whether it was, for me or for her, that I'm going to be an installation artist. And if you look at her work, you can, I think, see some similarities, but she was kind of the one who, threw me into this concept of installation art, because she's such a pioneering installation artist and almost kind of created the genre of it. And, learning from her and those experiences have kind of completely dictated and allowed me to create the work that I've created so far. I mean, to name a few other artists that really, I find inspiration with are Eva Hesse. I'm, very in love with a lot of her work. Sala Witt, the way he does his wall drawings, the wall works that he does are really quite incredible. And Sheila Hicks, who's really a textile artist and understands textiles in such a incredible and fundamental way and creates these beautiful pieces of work. And then finally, I think, the one experience that really changed the way that I created was when I saw Team Labs, a Team Lab exhibition in Tokyo before they opened up their museum. It was at the Mori Museum, and they had used like 15 or so different projections, as they generally do, to create this really incredible immersive environment. And I was so transfixed by it, and I was, became lost in the work. And it was something like I had never felt with the work before. And the second I got back to New York, because I was in Japan at the time, and so I come back to New York and I buy a projector right away. And I think like, okay, I'm gonna start using projections just, separate from any of the string stuff. And I'm playing around with this projection and this little installation that I had up in this like office space and in a different room. And I kind of turned the projection and it shot through all of the string. And I saw that the way that it kind of like refracted off the string and created this sort of three-dimensional, digital but physical piece of work. And it was kind of like everything clicked for me at that point. And I was like, okay, I didn't understand, I thought there were going to be two different things, and now this makes sense. And seeing that work and kind of feeling the emotions I think that I felt within that work, and buying that projector allowed me to kind of take the work to a different place where, I had been working with string for a while and really just more like in a sense of string exists in an environment, and then bringing that digital element of the projections into the string made it, gave it kind of that pop, I think, and allowed it to kind of all come together in some sort of way. So that experience of seeing that piece and seeing the power that, a physical component with a digital component can have together was really meaningful and continues to inspire my work.
Awesome. Yeah, Team Lab does incredible work.
Yeah.
Jen, any artists or experiences that have influenced your work?
Yeah, so many. It's I think probably overall, I really felt like I came up in this industry at David Stark. I spent a lot of time there. And David himself was really a big mentor to me. He really took a lot of inspiration from fine art and from painting and from sculpture and from a lot of things outside of the actual events world, and taught me to kind of look beyond my own medium. And the community there itself really taught me to just constantly be inspired by my peers and the people I meet through each project. For every project I'm on, we always have to hire technologists or industrial designers or people working in new tech. And it's so exciting to meet those people and learn more about their work and what they're doing. So I'm continually, I think, just inspired by people in the field and people I get to work with. And in addition to that, it's really project by project. We just did a project for a way where we had a kind of surrealist cloud environment. And so for that, we looked a lot at Dali and Magritte and really dove into surrealist painting to get inspiration for creating an immersive set. So yeah.
Awesome. Motomichi,
Yeah, I have so many. Let's see. I would say Michel Gondry, the filmmaker. I just can never get tired of his work. It's just such a simple idea, and he falls through it to execute. And then just the very basic idea that he has in the beginning just lives to the end in the final product. And then I just think it's amazing. And also it's very very artistic, very simple, mysterious. It just also really emotional in a way. So I just love his work, and like even the simple one that he did for music video he did for Chemical Brothers, where he had, I guess he had his brother edit it or something like that. But he shot the video when he traveled from Paris to London or something like that, and it just the scene changes according to the beat. That kind of stuff is just amazes me. Other artists, I like Tony Ausner. I saw his work long time ago, even way before there was such a thing as projection mapping, and I never really questioned. But I just these days I actually started looking more into his work. The way that he sort of like takes the space, and then he puts the projectors, and then he has multiple elements, and he lays out. And then I never really understood until recently that the effectiveness of it. It's just because when I started in projection work, and I was very focused on like hiding the projector, where to hide, and but it's the way he puts it. It's just like he lays out, and the people walk through it. That's just such a like masterful way to arrange it. And I would say last one is the Anthony Macau. A couple years ago, I saw his work in Pioneer Works. And then first time I saw the image, I didn't believe it. I thought I was like, oh, this is so Photoshop. And it's like, I gotta go see it. I just couldn't believe that you can do that kind of projection with the smoke and the projector. And then it was just exact amazing as what you see in the picture, which I believed that was Photoshop in the beginning. But it's such a simple way to execute, but it's just like perfectly done. So those are the artists that I really like these days. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much to the three of you. So we're gonna open it up to the audience and anyone who's watching. If the question is directed at any particular person, feel free to clarify that. So the first question is, what are some projects that you're working on next? And we can start with Jen, I guess.
Sure. I don't think I can say the brands, but since a lot of events had been canceled because of the current climate, one of our projects turned into an individual kind of experience at home. We're delivering products to individual people rather than them getting them at the event. So it's kind of this surprising delivered at home experience that I can't say too much more about, but will happen soon.
Cool. Jake, what are you working on next? And again, I know this is actually one of the next questions that has to do with the current situation we're in, but.
No, totally. I think I'm a little more, no, what I was going to say is that, yeah, we were working on two projects currently that are now paused as a result of what's going on, obviously, with the climate. We were working on a project and will continue to work on that project with Showfields. They're a space in downtown Manhattan that's very similar to, an experiential mall. And yeah, we're working on something for them when things are okay. And the second thing that we're currently working on is another project that's been very postponed, which is for Meow Wolf. That's based in Santa Fe, and it's for a concert that they're doing in a concert festival type of thing that they're doing in Denver that also has been postponed, but when everything clears up, we look forward to working on both of those projects. They were both really interesting projects, and we'll see, what happens with that.
Yeah, same here. I had a couple projects they postponed. We don't know when yet, but one is I was working on the logistics to do the subway animation thing in different city, and then that is we'll see. I was going to do it together with the festival and then in the form of like film, but then we'll see. Other one is outdoor projection. Conjunction with the art event, but we'll hopefully the next year. Yeah.
It's a bit of a tough question right now. But actually, the next question is, do you think the current situation with COVID-19 will affect the way that we consume and interact with art physically versus digitally? And if so, how? And does anyone want to take it? Or
I can jump in.
Okay.
I don't mind. It's not good, right? I mean, I don't want to say that like in a negative way. I think that when I think of, specifically my installations, there's a lot of interaction between the work and people who exist within it. It's an interactive piece of artwork. I think that I've come to the understanding that it's socially irresponsible to have people interacting with work in that sort of way, especially at this time. And I look forward to the day where, people feel comfortable enough to have that ability to interact with it. And yeah, I mean, it's hard and it's difficult. I think, everyone's having a really difficult time with this, and, I'm sorry that people can't interact with the art, but there's a lot of other stuff that's going on that I think is more crucial. So I think it's okay. And I look forward to the day when people can begin to interact again with that work in a positive and way.
I agree. I think it's the as it is right now, it's very difficult to do something like in closed space. Let's say that's where a lot of installation takes place. So at this point, I think it's very difficult. But one thing is that in the meantime, a lot of things are moving onto remote working situation. Like I teach, and now all the classes are going to be in Zoom. But I'm hoping that this sort of like opens up a lot of possibilities for people, and also in the reality, a lot of people professionally speaking, they do a lot of collaboration work and coast to coast in different. So I think it's the current condition might speed up that process, and people might start collaborating more, or there are a lot of stuff moving onto the digital, the internet. So hoping that something like that will just, when this whole thing is, the situation changes, and then it will just come out as positive outcome.
Yeah. So this question is directed to Motomichi. You said you do a lot of collaborations, and do you find it difficult to work with other artists? It feels like the three of you panelists here today obviously have very personal signatures. And how do you find a middle ground for everyone to express themselves when working together?
I think it's the sort of like defining. Well, I think it's most important when you do collaboration work. I think it's most important things that are each party understands the work very well. And then that way that you don't have to worry too much about what's the boundary and what should I say, what should I not say. I think it should be natural. So I think that again, I think that if I'm to do that, I like working with musicians, and then there's certain specific thing that, let's say, when I used to do a lot of DJing, and then I needed the music in certain way, and then but when I work with a musician that I really like, and I can just put the full trust to it, and then even though I get something that I didn't expect, and then it just comes out. Like, I guess it's kind of like a trust in a way. So I think that's really important. That.
Yeah. So I think we have one last question, which we'll work out with the timing. And then before we're done, I also invite everyone to kind of stick around to check out the Lightbox virtual experience of what it could have looked like if we had done this in person. But the last question is, how did everyone get started? Like, when did you know that you could effectively turn your art into a business, or whatever skill that it was that you had? Jen, we can start with you.
Sure. I started about 10 years ago, and it was at David Stark. And I think it started, I started feeling like I was ready to go out and start my own thing with good friends. About a year ago, I felt really ready. I felt like I had a lot of experience in New York and other cities. And I also just met the right people. The people that I work with now are amazing partners. And I think that's a really big part of it too.
Awesome. Motomichi.
How I got started?
Yeah.
I was working as a graphic designer, and then I think it's to me it's more of this sort of like a survival in a way. So I think if you work as I was working as a web designer, and then great commercial designers should be able to work with various types of assignments, and whether it's entertainment or pharmaceutical or the finance but as the years passed, I was starting to be very limited. Like, I was good at something, and then next year will be even more limited and limited. So and then I started having more like specific tastes for my work, for the visuals. And then one day I was thinking that I don't think I can just go on like this as a designer. I'm going to be the worst designer. And then I decided to focus on what I like. And then that time that is sort of like, to me, I waited to the point where I didn't have a much choice to go back.
Nice. Jake.
Hi.
Hey.
Yeah, so I had I did this very small installation in this office space that was my cousin's office that he allowed me right before he moved out to transform into an installation. And in that installation, I was able to create a piece of work. And when people came into that installation, a lot of people seemed interested in it, and a lot of people were taking photos of it, some of the stuff that we had been talking about before. And I think at that point it kind of made sense and was like, okay, we can kind of capitalize in a way on people liking to have these experiences, whether they be, through Instagram or photos, while at the same time having some sort of emotional experience and enjoying it. And I think that it was that point when I saw people kind of interacting with works and taking photos of work before it was even really commercialized in any sort of way, on platform or in a space that was, sorry, I'm blocking on the word, but on a space that, in a space that, didn't seem conventional. And there was the installation there was the art there, and it allowed people to kind of have an experience and document that experience. And I think through that, it made sense to say, hey, we can kind of figure out a way to make this work, on a much more universal level. And I think that's what it was for us.
Cool. So there is one more question that came in, which I think is interesting. And if you have a couple minutes, we can give short answers. You actually, Jake, you just said for us. So that's the question is, does anyone or anything play a role behind the scenes that is integral to your work?
Yeah.
Jake,
Okay.
do you want to start it? And then I'll hand it off to Motomichi and then.
Sure. Yeah. So I have a manager and agent that I've been working with for the last 5 years. His name's Richard Hebby, and he has really been able to bridge that gap between, the commercialization of work with, fine art. And he's kind of allowed me and is able to see how we can take something like an installation and apply it to a lot of people, and what the value of that installation may be to a company that's looking to really have some sort of social media impact, social media ramifications and ripples, and how you can kind of take something like that and, I guess, put it to use in a way. And working with him and working on projects with him has really allowed me to kind of see a scope of projects, and not just the fine art world, but every kind of, facet of where art can be, where art is, and where art should be and can be created. And he's really allowed me to see that. So that would be my answer for that one.
Cool. Jen, anyone that works kind of in the background that plays an essential role?
Oh my gosh, so many people. I think that's why I love events so much, is that it really isn't about one person. It's usually about, anywhere from 20 to 80 people, depending on the size of the event, between fabricators, lighting designers, caterers, PAs, production assistants, producers. You have so many moving parts, and that's one of the most exciting things, really, when putting an event together. So I think the immediate is my 4 partners are good friends, people I talk to every day and work with constantly, who I love. And then beyond that, we get to hire so many amazing people, and that's one of the best parts.
Awesome.
Okay. Yeah. Well, my case, I pretty much work alone. So I handle most of the aspects of that. But let's say, like outdoor, let's say projection installation, kind of typically that the part that I don't, I have somebody else, so that I work with someone, is the equipment and installation part. But that is basically where there are a lot of logistics to be solved, so that way I collaborate with, and big projection work can be maybe easy, can involve maybe 20 people, and then for the installation they bring like 5 or 6 people, and then prior to that there are 3 or 4 months of preparation of that, so there are a lot of communications there, and then yeah, but most of the time I pretty much just handle it as a main contact.
Cool. Well, I think this wraps it up. I want to thank Jen, Motomichi, and Jake for joining us today. Hopefully this all went well on the other side of the stream. But we'll be sending out a recap email to everyone who was watching today. And then, like I said earlier, stick around for even like 2 minutes to visit Lightbox with everyone's work on the walls. Sorry we can't offer you drinks today. But in the meantime, stay safe, stay inside, stay healthy, and we'll meet you, Lightbox Live will meet you again next Monday at the same time. Thanks, everyone.